Lauren Carter sat at the edge of her king-sized bed, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of a half-empty glass of wine. The view from her luxury suite in downtown Chicago was breathtaking, endless city lights stretching across the skyline, but she barely noticed. Her laptop sat open on the desk, filled with notes for her high-stakes client meeting tomorrow. A deal like this could elevate her career, securing her place among the top financial consultants in the industry. But none of that mattered right now. Her phone buzzed. The name on the screen made her stomach drop. Victoria Carter. Lauren exhaled sharply through her nose, debating whether to pick up. It was never good news when Victoria called. She let it ring once, twice, a third time. Then, against her better judgment, she swiped to answer. Well, well. Victoria's voice oozed with condescension, cutting through the speaker like nails on glass. If it isn't our little runaway. Lauren's grip on the phone tightened. She leaned back against the headboard, schooling her expression into one of detached boredom. Victoria. Oh, don't sound so thrilled, darling. I'm calling with good news. Lauren didn't respond. Victoria thrived on reactions, thrived on manipulation. The best way to beat her was to give her nothing. There was a pause, then a dramatic sigh. All right, I won't drag it out. I just wanted to be the first to tell you. Your trust fund? It's gone, every last penny. I transferred it to Emily. Lauren's blood froze. Emily, her stepsister. The golden child, the princess, the spoiled brat who had never worked a day in her life. Lauren's jaw clenched. You did what? Her voice was perfectly even, devoid of emotion. Oh, come on, Lauren. Victoria's tone turned sickly sweet. Did you really think you needed that money? You've been running around playing career woman, throwing yourself into work. Meanwhile, Emily has a wedding to plan, a new house to buy, a future to build. Lauren forced herself to inhale slowly. Exhale. Stay calm. Victoria's tone sharpened, sensing the lack of response. I mean, let's be honest, dear. You were just letting that money sit there, collecting dust. It was your mother's money, not yours. Emily deserves it just as much as you do. More, actually. Lauren could hear the smug satisfaction in Victoria's voice. She wanted rage, despair, a breakdown. She wasn't going to get it. Thanks for letting me know, Lauren said smoothly. Silence. Then, the shift. That's it? Victoria scoffed, the frustration leaking into her voice. That's all you have to say? No screaming, no crying, no calling Daddy to fix it? Lauren almost laughed. Victoria had no idea. She glanced at the bedside clock. 10:37 p.m. Her mother's trust fund, her inheritance, the one thing meant to secure her future, had just been stolen. And yet Lauren felt nothing but a deadly sense of clarity. Is there anything else? She asked flatly. Victoria hesitated. Lauren could hear the uncertainty creeping in. This wasn't the reaction she expected. Tsk, Victoria finally sneered. You always were a disappointment. Click. The call disconnected. Lauren lowered her phone, staring at her reflection in the hotel window. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. Flashback. The setup for revenge 6 months ago. Lauren sat in a dimly lit office, tapping her fingers against the polished wood of a conference table. Across from her, Henry Mitchell, her mother's old lawyer, leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. I don't want to accuse anyone of anything. Yet, Henry said cautiously. But I've been getting some, let's say, concerning inquiries about your trust fund. Lauren arched a brow. Inquiries? Henry nodded, sliding a folder across the table. She opened it, skimming through the bank records, access requests, and flagged transactions. Her stomach twisted, all linked to Victoria Carter. She closed the folder with a slow, deliberate motion. You said yet, she murmured. Henry nodded, because I took the liberty of putting fail-safes in place. Lauren glanced up. Fail-safes? Henry smirked. You're your mother's daughter, Lauren. She planned for this. Lauren exhaled, the tension in her chest loosening slightly. Margaret Carter had always been 2 steps ahead. "Any unauthorized access attempt will be flagged and logged," Henry continued. "And if she tries anything, we'll know." Lauren shut the folder and met his gaze. "Good." Present day, Chicago. Lauren scrolled through her contacts and pressed Henry's number. He picked up on the second ring. "She finally made her move," Lauren said. "I know," Henry replied, his tone calm but sharp. "I got an alert this morning. The trust fund is untouched, but we have her. Dead to rights." Lauren closed her eyes, letting out a slow breath. It was still there. Victoria had tried. She had failed. Now it was Lauren's turn to strike. "Send everything to my father," she said, her voice cold and steady. "It's time he sees the truth." There was a brief pause. Then Henry said, "Consider it done." Lauren hung up. She stared out at the Chicago skyline, her reflection blending into the sea of lights. She had spent years letting Victoria push her aside, letting her father ignore her, letting them treat her like she wasn't part of the family. Not anymore. She grabbed her suitcase, threw in the essentials, and called the front desk. "I need a flight to New York, earliest available." The receptionist's voice came through smoothly. "There's one leaving at 5:45 a.m., first-class seat available." Lauren smiled coldly. "I'll take it." It was time to go home. The yellow cab rolled to a slow stop in front of the Carter estate, a grand 3-story mansion nestled in the upper suburbs of New York City. It had once been her home. Now it felt like enemy territory. Lauren Carter stepped out, pulling her coat tightly around her body as a sharp autumn breeze cut through the air. The towering oak trees lining the driveway swayed under the evening sky, their golden leaves fluttering to the ground. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself. Tonight, everything would change. She marched up the marble steps, heels clicking against the stone, and rang the doorbell. A few moments later, the door swung open. Emily Carter stood in the doorway, wrapped in an expensive silk robe, her blonde curls tumbling over her shoulders. Her blue eyes widened in genuine shock. "Lauren?" Emily blinked, confused. Lauren didn't answer. She simply stepped past her and walked into the house without invitation. Emily sputtered, hurrying after her. "What are you doing here?" Lauren's gaze swept over the house, a house that had once felt warm and full of life. Now it felt sterile, cold, like a museum dedicated to someone else's perfect little world. The polished mahogany staircase, the crystal chandelier above the grand foyer, the gleaming marble floors, all of it screamed wealth, power, and control. Victoria's control. Lauren's lips curled in disgust. "Where's Dad?" she asked, voice sharp. Emily fidgeted. She always fidgeted when she was lying. "He's out." Lauren arched a brow. "Convenient." She turned on her heel and strode into the living room. The second she entered, the air shifted. The laughter, light, polished, and fake, came to an abrupt halt. Sitting on the white leather couch, sipping coffee with 2 of her socialite friends, was Victoria Carter. She was dressed in a perfectly tailored navy silk dress, her dark hair styled in flawless waves, a diamond bracelet glinting on her wrist. She hadn't aged a day, and neither had her smugness. Lauren saw it, the flicker of surprise that crossed Victoria's face before she quickly masked it with that infuriating smirk. "Lauren, darling," Victoria purred, setting her cup down. "What a surprise! I thought you'd be too busy with your fancy job to visit." Lauren took a calculated step forward, tilting her head. "And yet, you seem completely unsurprised to see me." Victoria's eyes narrowed just slightly before she recovered. "Please. Why would I be? You always overreact." Lauren smiled. "Overreact," she echoed. "You stole my trust fund." Silence. One of Victoria's friends shifted awkwardly, clearly regretting her decision to be here. Victoria, however, remained composed. "Oh, sweetheart," she sighed. so condescending it made Lauren's skin crawl. "You make it sound so dramatic. The money was just sitting there collecting dust. I was only thinking about what's best for this family." "By committing fraud?" Lauren interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade. Victoria froze. Lauren reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a folder of legal documents, and dropped it onto the glass coffee table with a loud thud. "This," Lauren said coldly, "is a record of every illegal attempt you made to access my trust fund, every forged signature, every wire transfer you tried to process." Victoria's face drained of color. Emily, who had been lingering near the doorway, sucked in a sharp breath. Lauren turned her gaze to her stepsister. "Did you know?" she asked, her voice deceptively calm. Emily's lips parted, her brows knitting together in panic. No, she stammered. "I mean, Mom just told me it was available. I thought she handled it legally." Lauren let out a slow, humorless laugh. "Wow," she said, shaking her head. "You really are just as stupid as she thinks you are." Emily flushed deep red, looking utterly mortified. Victoria snapped out of her shock and stood up abruptly, her hands tightening into fists. "You don't speak to your sister like that," she hissed. Lauren met her glare head on. "She's not my sister." Victoria's nostrils flared, her composure finally cracking. "You ungrateful little—" Lauren stepped forward, invading her space, lowering her voice to a whisper. "You can throw your tantrums all you want, Victoria," she said, "but my lawyer has already sent everything to the bank's fraud department, and to my father." Victoria visibly stiffened. Lauren smiled. "He'll be home soon," she murmured. "I hope you have a good explanation ready." And with that, she turned on her heel and sat down on the couch, completely at ease. She crossed her legs, picked up one of the discarded coffee cups, and took a slow sip. Victoria looked like she wanted to slap it out of her hand. Lauren simply stared back at her, waiting. The house, once filled with fake warmth and laughter, was now silent as a graveyard. Outside, the autumn wind howled through the trees. Inside, the storm was just beginning. The grandfather clock in the foyer ticked mercilessly, each second dragging out the unbearable tension in the air. Lauren sat calmly on the pristine white leather couch, one leg crossed over the other, completely unbothered. Across from her, Victoria Carter stood frozen, her manicured fingers twitching slightly as she processed the reality of her situation. Emily, still wrapped in her ridiculously expensive silk robe, shifted uneasily by the fireplace, avoiding Lauren's gaze. Lauren, meanwhile, was the picture of composed fury. Outside, the wind whistled through the trees, the rustling leaves scratching against the mansion's windows. Inside, the silence grew heavier with each passing second. Then, the front door swung open with force. A deep, familiar voice echoed through the house. "Lauren?" Richard Carter had arrived, the moment of truth. Lauren stood up slowly, turning to face her father. He looked older than she remembered, his dark hair streaked with gray, his once strong posture slightly hunched as if the weight of years of ignorance had finally begun to sink in. His eyes darted between Lauren, Victoria, and the folder of legal documents still sitting ominously on the coffee table. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with confusion. Lauren picked up the folder, walking toward him with measured steps. "I think you should read this first," she said, handing him the thick stack of papers. Richard took them hesitantly, his fingers trembling slightly as he flipped open the first page. The color drained from his face. Lauren watched as every single illusion he had built about Victoria shattered before his eyes. Each fraudulent attempt, each forged signature, each manipulation carefully documented and categorized. She saw it happen, the exact moment his world tilted on its axis. Victoria broke the silence first, voice dripping with desperation. "Richard, You forged my signature?" Richard's voice was deadly quiet. Victoria stilled. "Richard, listen. It's not what it looks like." Lauren tilted her head, watching the scene unfold with detached amusement. "It's exactly what it looks like," she interjected, voice sharp as a blade. "She tried to steal from me just like she's been trying for years, only this time she got caught." Richard's hands shook as he turned another page, his gaze darkening with every new revelation. The wire transfers Victoria attempted to process, the forged letters to the bank, the email chains pressuring financial advisors to grant her access, all in black and white. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, his disbelief morphing into anger. Victoria stepped forward, grasping his arm. "Richard, please, you know I only wanted what was best for this family." Lauren let out a slow, mocking laugh. "That's rich, Victoria, really. Tell me, when exactly did you start considering me part of this family?" Victoria whipped her head toward her, eyes blazing. "You selfish little brat! Enough." Richard's voice cut through the chaos like a blade, firm and unforgiving. Victoria's mouth snapped shut, his hands curled into tight fists, his jaw clenching so hard Lauren thought he might break his teeth. "Get out," he said, his voice eerily calm. Victoria froze. "What?" Richard lifted his gaze, cold, unreadable, detached. "I want you out of my house. Tonight." Emily let out a choked noise, looking at her father in wide-eyed horror. "Dad, please." "You too, Emily." The room went deathly silent. Victoria's last stand. Victoria gripped Richard's arm again, her nails digging into his sleeve. "Richard, don't do this. You need me. This family needs me." Richard slowly peeled her hand off like she was nothing but a stranger. "No, Victoria," he said, voice steel cold. "I needed my wife, but all I got was a liar." Victoria's face twisted in fury. She turned on Lauren instead, her final desperate attempt at control. "You planned this, didn't you?" she spat. "You set me up." Lauren smirked. "No, Victoria, you did this to yourself." Victoria's breath hitched, realization finally settling in. She had lost. There was no coming back from this. Richard turned away from her, walking toward the staircase. "Pack your things," he said over his shoulder. "I'll have my lawyer send you the divorce papers tomorrow." Victoria let out a furious, unhinged scream, grabbing a glass vase from the table and throwing it against the wall. The shattering sound echoed through the house, but no one reacted. Not Richard, not Lauren, not even Emily. Victoria let out a guttural sob, turning on her heel and storming upstairs. Emily stood paralyzed, tears silently streaming down her face. She looked at Lauren, eyes pleading. "Lauren, please, I didn't know." Lauren sighed dramatically, tilting her head. "I don't care." Emily's breath hitched. Lauren turned away, grabbing her coat and heading for the door. She had won, and it felt damn good. The silence in the Carter estate was suffocating. Victoria and Emily had stormed upstairs, their perfect world crumbling around them, but the damage had already been done. Lauren stood near the grand window in the living room, watching the streetlights flicker outside. The weight of the past 12 years of manipulation, deceit, and betrayal hung in the air, and finally, it was over. Her father sat slumped on the couch, staring blankly at the folder of legal documents still resting on the coffee table. Richard Carter looked defeated. Lauren studied him, waiting for him to say something. For years she had wished for this moment, for her father to open his eyes, to see who Victoria really was. Now that it had happened, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like exhaustion. Richard ran a shaking hand through his graying hair, finally breaking the silence. "I had no idea." Lauren let out a soft, humorless laugh. "Of course you didn't." Richard winced at her tone. He knew. Deep down, he had always known, but it had been easier to ignore it. "Lauren?" He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I should have protected you." Lauren's chest tightened. A part of her, the younger version of herself, the girl who had longed for her father's approval, wanted to say something cutting, something cruel. But that wasn't who she was anymore. She was done fighting for scraps of love. "It doesn't matter now," she said simply. Richard lifted his head, his expression pained. It matters to me. Lauren stared at him for a long moment before sighing. You let her push me aside. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. I know, Richard admitted, his voice thick with regret. I was grieving, and I let her take control of everything. Lauren folded her arms, her gaze unwavering. That's not an excuse. Richard nodded slowly, his eyes glassy with guilt. No, it's not. Silence stretched between them. For the first time in years, Lauren saw it. The flicker of the father she had once adored, buried beneath years of Victoria's lies. Maybe there was something worth salvaging. Maybe. But not tonight. Lauren grabbed her coat from the chair and turned toward the door. Where are you going? Richard asked, standing up. Lauren hesitated, hand resting on the doorknob. Back to my hotel, she answered. Richard looked like he wanted to say something else, but instead he just nodded. Lauren. She turned slightly. Yeah? His throat bobbed as he swallowed. I really am sorry. Lauren gave him a long, unreadable look. Then, without another word, she walked out the door. The aftermath. Victoria's fall. 2 days later, Lauren sat in Henry Mitchell's office, sipping a cup of bitter coffee as she skimmed over the final legal reports. Victoria took a plea deal, Henry said, flipping through his notes. She won't serve time, but she's paying heavy restitution. Lauren smirked. So she's broke. Henry chuckled. Essentially. Lauren leaned back in her chair. Good. Henry arched a brow. You don't seem particularly satisfied. Lauren exhaled, tapping her fingernails against the polished mahogany desk. It's not about revenge, she admitted. It never was. I just wanted my life back. Henry nodded in understanding. And you have it now. Lauren hummed, staring at the city skyline through the office window. Did she? Victoria was out of the picture. Emily had gone radio silent, and her father was finally trying to fix things. But there was still a part of her that felt restless, like something was still unfinished. Emily's weak apology. Lauren's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Emily Carter. For a second, she considered ignoring it. But then, out of curiosity, she swiped to answer. Lauren? Emily's voice was small, hesitant. Lauren leaned against the balcony railing outside Henry's office, the cold wind biting against her skin. What do you want, Emily? Emily was silent for a moment. Then, I'm sorry. Lauren let out a slow breath, closing her eyes. For what exactly? Emily hesitated. For everything. For not seeing what Mom was doing. For not... Lauren cut her off. You knew. Emily sucked in a sharp breath. You knew, Lauren repeated, her voice firm. You just didn't care as long as you benefited from it. Emily didn't deny it. Lauren sighed. I don't hate you, Emily, she said, surprising even herself. But I don't trust you either. Emily's breath hitched. Can we fix that? Lauren considered it. Then she shook her head. I don't think so. And with that, she ended the call. She had wasted enough time on people who didn't deserve it. A fresh start. A week later, Lauren stood in her new corner office, the headquarters of her very own financial consulting firm. The trust fund her mother left her? She had invested it into something bigger than herself. Her business was already booming, attracting high-profile clients who valued her expertise and direct approach. Henry walked in, a proud grin on his face. How does it feel? He asked. Lauren looked around the sleek office space, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline. It feels like the beginning of something great, she admitted. Henry clapped a hand on her shoulder. Your mother would be proud. Lauren smiled softly, running her fingers along the edge of her desk. I hope so. And for the first time in years, she truly believed it. She had fought for what was hers, and she had won. Lauren Carter stood in front of the house she had grown up in, the grand Carter estate in New York. The once imposing mansion felt different now, less like a battlefield and more like a closed chapter in her life. Autumn leaves swirled around her feet as the crisp air bit at her skin, but she barely noticed. Her father was waiting by the door. She hadn't planned to come back here, but tonight was different. Tonight was for her mother. Scene 1. The final goodbye to the past. Richard Carter stood by the front steps, his expression unreadable. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he admitted. Lauren exhaled, shoving her hands into her coat pockets. "Neither was I." Richard nodded toward the front door. "I found something. I thought you might want to see it." Curiosity flickered in her chest, but she said nothing as she followed him inside. The house was quieter now. No more Victoria's voice echoing through the hallways. No more fake laughter at the dinner table. It was peaceful. Richard led her into the study, her mother's old office. Lauren stopped in her tracks. The room had been untouched for years, but now it looked exactly the way she remembered it. The bookshelves were neatly arranged. The old mahogany desk sat by the window, the same antique lamp casting a soft glow, and on the desk there was a small wooden box. Richard motioned toward it. "I found this while going through some of your mother's things." His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "She left it for you." Lauren swallowed, hard. Slowly, she stepped forward and lifted the lid. Inside was a letter, written in her mother's handwriting. Her breath caught as she unfolded the paper, her fingers trembling. A letter from the past. "My dearest Lauren, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you, but please know, I never truly left. I always knew you would grow into someone strong, someone brilliant. I always knew you had your father's heart and my determination. This trust fund, it was never just about money. It was about freedom. It was about making sure that no matter what happened, you could always choose your own path. But people will try to take that from you. They will try to make you believe you don't deserve it. They will tell you you're selfish for holding on to what is rightfully yours. Don't let them. Always be prepared, sweetheart, and never let anyone take what is yours. Trust yourself. I do. Love, Mom." Lauren clutched the letter tightly, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She felt her father's gaze on her, but he didn't say anything. After a long silence, she carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the box. Then she turned to Richard. "Thank you for showing me this." Richard's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "She would be so proud of you, you know." Lauren managed a small smile. "I know." And for the first time in years, she truly believed it. A future on her own terms. 1 month later, Lauren Carter stood in the center of her brand new office, the headquarters of her very own financial consulting firm. The office was sleek, modern, and everything she had built for herself. The trust fund her mother left her? It wasn't just a safety net, it was a foundation, and she had used it to build something far greater than anyone had expected. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Henry Mitchell walked in, his signature amused grin on his face. "Well," he said, taking in the new space, "this is a hell of an upgrade from that hotel room in Chicago." Lauren smirked. "You should see the view from my office." Henry chuckled. "You did it, Lauren. You took them down, and you built something better." Lauren leaned against her desk, crossing her arms. "I didn't take them down," she corrected. "They destroyed themselves." Henry nodded approvingly. "So, what's next?" Lauren exhaled, turning to look out the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched out before her, bright and full of possibilities. Whatever the hell I want. The final visit to the past. A few days later, Lauren found herself standing at her mother's grave, a bouquet of fresh white roses in her hands. Her father stood beside her. They had come here together for the first time in years. The air was crisp, the scent of fallen leaves lingering. Lauren placed the roses down gently, brushing her fingers over the name carved into the headstone. "I finally did it, Mom," she whispered. She felt Richard shift beside her. "You know what your mother used to say about you," he murmured. Lauren glanced at him. "What?" Richard smiled softly, eyes full of something warm, something real. "She always said you were like a diamond. Pressure just made you stronger." Lauren let out a breath, a slow, quiet laugh escaping her lips. She wasn't wrong. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the letter her mother had written, reading the words one last time before tucking it safely back inside. Then, with a final glance at the grave, she turned away. She had spent years fighting for what was hers. Now, it was time to live. And this time, it was on her own terms,